Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. In this video, we are going to talk about how to upload a file using a Spring Boot. Not only that, I have a CSV file which is in my local machine and which contains some data in it like account number, first name, last name, and the account type, email, and address and zip code. So basically what we are trying to do is let's insert some record in our database, and then we will read the CSV file and we'll fetch the information from the CSV file, and we will add this information in our table as well. So we don't need a fancy database here, so we are going to use the H2 in-memory database. So first thing what we need to do, we have to create a project. So let's do that. So right click, new, and create Spring. So let's start a Spring starter project. And what do we need? So I'm gonna create something like file upload in Spring Boot. So, and I'm gonna use Java 8 version, and this is my package, and let's click next. And what are the two important things which is necessary? We're gonna use the JPA, and for the database we are gonna use the H2 database, and we don't need anything else required. There will be some additional dependency which you're requiring. We will add that later. So click next and finish it. It might take a few seconds to download your project here. So the project has been created here. So you could see a source main Java, and we have a resource section, and also we have Maven dependency. See, whenever you create a Maven project, first thing, let's go to Maven and update your project once. It's a good practice. Okay, the next thing what we need to do, basically we need a database, correct? So we don't have any fancy database like Oracle MySQL. So we are going to use the H2 in-memory database. When we talk about the in-memory database, only till the moment your server is up and running, you have your H2 access to the H2 database. If you stop your server, it won't be accessible. So that is the reason it's called as the in-memory database. So basically how the in-memory database will create the tables and the database. Basically, it will read your project, and if it is finds any database entity, which is a JPA file, if it is finds, then it will create the table according to the entity, because in the entity we have the table and the column information. So for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a simple entity which contains a few elements in it. And then when you start the application, it automatically creates the table for us. So I'm going to create a class here, or maybe maybe we can keep it inside the entity folder, and I'm going to call this as maybe we can call them as account details, and click finish. And I'm going to add a few elements here. Let's create a DTO, and then we'll convert them into a database entity. So first thing, what do I need? I need a private integer ID, and then I need private and int account number, because we are going to create the field names which is going to help us to store this information like account number, first name, last name, account type, and email, right? So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to create private string first name, and then I might need the last name as well. So I'm going to copy this and paste it here, and I'm going to just change this to a last name. So the next thing what we need, what kind of account type? So it's going to be private string account underscore type. Sorry, account type. So the next thing, we need an email ID, correct? So let's copy this. So email, and then what do we need? We need an address, right? Address, and then we need a zip code. Okay, so now we have all the necessary information. The next thing what we need the getters and setters, correct? And let's create getters and setters. We don't need to use the ID because it will be auto generated when you're using the database. Okay, so now we have everything in place. The next thing, let's create a simple constructor which is required if you are using an entity. So here what we're gonna do is constructor, and I'm gonna use anything here, deselect all and generate. So I have my default constructor here. Okay, so now it's just a simple Java entity. Now we need to convert this into a Java JPA entity. So let's try that. So first thing, we need to mark that as a entity. And the next thing what we need to do, we need to provide the annotation for what is the table name for that. Table, and let's provide what's the table name. So let's create a table name called account underscore details. Okay, so next thing, we have to provide the column name for each and every field here, because each and every Java attribute will represent a field in the database or our specific table here. So here, primary key is must when you're using a JPA. So I'm going to annotate this with the ID, and then how it has to be generated or to increment the value. So first of all, let me provide the column name here. What is the column name in the table? In the table, I'm going to have the same name as the ID. So name is equal to ID. And then, so how I'm going to manipulate the data? It's a primary key, right? So let's generate some random value. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use the generate value. And here we're going to use the strategy, how I'm going to populate a value. There are multiple ways. And now we're going to use generation type.identity. And then, so the first thing is done. The next thing, we have to provide the column names for the rest of the fields. So here, account number, it is going to be account underscore number in our table. And then for the first name, so we'll have something like first underscore name. Pretty much the same for the last name as well. Last underscore name, and then the account type. Account underscore type, and then we'll have email, and then we have address, and then we have a zip code. Okay, so now the first thing is done. The next thing, what will happen if I run the code? So basically when you run the code, it will create this table, because we have the H2 support in our machine, in our POM file, right? So let's right click and run this project as a Spring Boot app. But before that, we need to go to the property file, this application property, because when you're trying to use the H2 database, there are certain things which you need to provide, which means what is the database name, because the latest versions, they automatically create a database whenever you start your application, but we don't want to follow that. We can create our own database. I mean, every time when I start the application, it has to create the same kind of information. So I don't have to go and check the logs, what is the database name and all. We don't need to do that. So I'm hard coding everything here. So JDBC H2 in memory database, my database name is testdb and the username is SA. So everything else remains the same. And next thing, let's start the application. Okay, so here is the deal. So I don't want my Spring Boot to create my table. I want to create on myself, because every time when I start the application, I want to load some default data in it. So I'm going to create a file in my resource section. Sorry, not this one. New file. Okay, so I'm gonna call as a schema.sql, and I'm gonna copy paste the same thing, Control C and Control V, and I'm gonna call them as a data. So basically what will happen here, When you start the application, your H2 dependency will look for the schema. The schema information contains the table information, which means how to create a table, and if you're trying to alter some table columns and other information, pretty much the DDL operation. And data SQL, which contains the DML operation, insert statement. I already have the scripts here, so what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna open this and I'm gonna paste the query, which I already have it, so I'm gonna copy paste it. So here, so this is the query. I don't need the play details here. So what I'm gonna do, I have account details, contains ID, account number, account type, address, email, and the other information, and ID is my primary key. So the next thing is my table is ready, but when I start my application, I want some data to be populated in this table. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna use my data.sql file, and then I'm gonna insert a few records in it. So I already have the insert script for that. So let's copy that, and I'm gonna bring it here. So it has insert into two records in it. So whenever I run this, these two information are available in our table. The first thing what we're gonna do, we are going to run the application, and we'll see whether the table is created successfully and the data in it is available or not. So let's start our application, run as Spring Boot app. The application is getting started. It might take a few seconds. Okay, so application has been started successfully. And if you go up, you can see how the table has been created and other information. If you take a look at this place, let me show you that where the table scripts are available. So here you should see somewhere. Where is it? So connections, files, see here, insert into account details. So before this step, it gets the schema.sql file and it will create the table. So it will insert the record here. So if you go back to above, you should be able to see the create a table, a script somewhere here. So let me try to search for it. Find. Okay, so here create table script is available here. So the create table has been done here, and after that the insert happened after that. So the first thing what we need to do is we have to go back to the H2 console, and then we'll check whether the table is created or the database is created and the records in it. So let's go over the browser. The way how we need to access HTTP. Localhost and your port number H2 console here. So application, oh okay, what happened? Let's go back. The application not started successfully. Let's go back and see what is wrong here. Okay, so the application is started and some reason it got shut down. So let me restart one more time. So I restarted my application. It's just a problem with my Eclipse IDE. So now it is working fine. Right, so next thing, let's go back to our browser. Let's refresh it again. Now it is loading because our server is up and running. So now we have the information here. So sometimes if you don't see this information here, what you can do is you can go back to your Eclipse and you can go to your application properties, and then you can copy this information and then you can put it here. And then you can provide the username and the password. And now give it a test connection, test successful, and let's connect. See here, the account details, the table is automatically created because I don't have any database, because it's a H2 database. It's automatically created based on the entities. So let's click account details and let's give it a run. See now, I did not insert anything, but it automatically inserted a few records before even I see my application, because it's done as part of Spring Boot running. I mean, when the Spring Boot application gets started, right, it will be done as part of these two files which we talked about data.sql and schema.sql. Just remember one thing is schema.sql is for DDL operation and data.sql is for DML operations. Okay, so now it's pretty much simple, right? So what is the next thing we need to do? As I mentioned, I have a file which contains the account information. I want to upload the file and then I want to read the information and I want to store inside my database. Let's see how we can do that. Right, so we're gonna feed the CSV file as an input to my method and we need to read the file. There are multiple dependencies or different kind of dependencies are available to work with the CSV. The one I'm gonna use is that, so this is a dependency we're gonna use, com.university. So this is a dependency which I'm gonna use it. Just right click and go to Maven and update your project once. So the next thing, let's work with the controller. So let's create a controller here. New class, and I'm gonna create inside the folder cost controllers. So I'm gonna saying like bank controller, or you can simply call as a controller also, it's up to you, and finish. So now we have the bank controller. First thing, we need to provide some necessary step making this particular class as a REST controller. And the next thing what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create a method which will accept my file as the input. So it is going to be a post mapping. So post mapping, and then I'm gonna use the path as, maybe I can use upload file, right? So upload is fine. And then I'm gonna create a method. So basically what I'm trying to do, so if it's uploaded successful, I'm gonna simply return uploaded successfully. So it's going to be a public and string upload data. So here is the important part. Let me put something like a return null. Okay, so here TURN. So what is the input here? So I'm receiving the input from the client, or we can call them, maybe for us it's just a postman. So I'm gonna receive as a request param. So request param, and let's provide a indicator to it, which is a file, and the file which we're gonna receive is a multi-part file. That is what we'll use for uploading purpose, file. And there might be a possibility it might throw an exception because we are working with the files, right? So throws exception in the header. Okay, so the next thing what we need to do, let's write the business logic, right? So we need to write a logic to receive a file from the input, and then we need to extract the records. So after the records, what will happen? It will give us a list of account details. We have a single account details, right? So similar way, I'm going to create this object with the help of input data. So what I'm going to do, let's go back to our controller. First of all, let's create a list. And this is going to be contains a list of account details, and account list is equal to new array list. Okay, so which is we don't need to provide this one anyway because we have a type inference in place. So the next thing what we need to do, we need to receive the file. Okay, so we have the file information here, and what we're gonna do, we're gonna get the stream from the file. So file dot get input stream, input a stream. So the next thing, so once you received the input stream, what the next thing we need to do, we need to create the parser. Okay, so first of all we're going to work with the CSV, right? So you need to use CSV parser setting, and settings, and is equal to new CSV parser settings. It is pretty simple. Okay, now anyway, the first step is done. The next step is, let's go back and see how the file does it looks. So let's go to the desktop, and here I have the file account details 1.c. If you take a look at this file, the first record, the first column or first record here is just a headers, and we don't want to process this one because we need to process the rest of the elements, not the header. So we have to update the setting like do not consider the first record. So that is where the header extraction enabled. So settings dot set header extraction. I'm extracting the headers. I don't want to use that, so I'm going to make that as true. Okay, the next thing what we need to do, we have to create the CSV parser, and then parser is equal to new CSV parser, and in the CSV parser we have to pass the settings which we created. Okay, so the next thing, so now we have the settings. The next thing what we need to do, use the parser and get all the records from the input stream. Okay, so let's try that. So parser dot, what we need to do, parse all records, and we need to pass the input stream. So it will take the input stream and it will process all the records, and what we need to do is create the instance out of it. Okay, so we have a list of record which contains each and every record in our CSV file. All we need to do is just extract this and create the object for account details. Okay, let's do that. So what I'm gonna do, parse all records and dot for each method and record. I'm gonna use the lambda expression here. Okay, so here each and every record will be processed one by one, correct? And here we need to create a account details. Account is equal to new account details. Okay, so now the next thing, we need to receive the data from the record, and then we need to set it to the account. So first thing, account dot set account number. So how we gonna get the account number in the first place? We have the record, right? So record dot get string, and here we need to provide the column name. So what is the column name here? Account underscore number. Okay, so we need to provide that here, account underscore number. So now we got the account number. So what's the problem here? Account number is an integer, correct? So we are receiving as a string. So what we can do, we can parse it. So integer dot parse int, and let's paste it. Okay, now we are good for the first one. The next thing what we're gonna do, account dot set first name. Let's follow the same thing here. Copy that and paste it here, and instead of account number we're gonna use first underscore a name. And then what we're gonna do is account dot set last name, and let's paste it here, and last underscore name. And then what we can do, let's map all the fields. Set, we tried account number, and let's try account type. And here what I'm gonna do, account underscore type. Okay, so the next element, account dot set address. Let's do the same here. So it's going to be address, and then account dot set let me try email. Yes, let's try email here. So here it is going to be email, and finally the zip code, account dot set a zip code, and let's receive the zip code from here. Okay, so now pretty much we set everything. Then what finally we need to do, account list dot add account detail. So at the end, you will have a list of account details. If it is a single record, you can simply use .save method. But since we have multiple records, we need to use the save all method. But to do that, I need to have the repository or a JPA support. So we have account details, right? So that is where we have account details. Now we need to create a repository for that. It's a repository which will help us to communicate to the database, and it has its own methods. We don't have to write each explanation for each and every method. So let's create a class here. I'm just going to create an interface here. So I'm going to call this as a account settings or account repository, and finish, and it's gonna extends and JPA repository. For JPA repository, you need to provide the entity name and what is the primary key. Primary key is an integer in this table, and make sure you annotate with that with the proper annotation as a repository. So this, based on this, it will identify. So you might be thinking, so where is the save code and all? Because we are extending JPA repository, right? JPA repository itself has a lot of method support: find all and list, save all, find by ID, save all the methods. So whenever you need any custom query, then you can write a query inside the interface. For now, we don't need that. So all we need to do, just create auto wire this auto repository in our controller. So let's go back to our controller, and here what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna account repository and service. So we need to annotate that with the auto wired, and then we need to import that. So now all set, right? So we have an upload method, and then finally we need to return upload success. Okay, so what we need to do, so we have the service, right? So that is a repository service dot save all method, because I'm gonna pass the list here, which is the account list. So now pretty much we have everything. All we need to do is let's restart our application, and then we'll test it out. So let's stop your application once, and then what we need to do, we need to start again and file upload in Spring Boot. And before that, let's copy this URL and let's go back to our Postman, and here let's create a request. So it is going to be a Postman, right? So post method. So http local host 8080/upload, and we need to pass some information. So you need to go to the body, and here we need to pass the file as an input, right? So what we need to do, let's use the form data, and what is the key? File. This is the parameter. So I'm gonna pass as a file here, but the way how we can pass the file here, instead of text, you use the file here. So you will get the selected files option here. When you click that, it will take you to the file chooser, and I'm going to choose account details 1.csv and click open. So now we have the input ready. All we need to do is just trigger the request. But before, let's go back to the console to see how the data looks like. We need to refresh it once, because we restarted our application, right? So it might reload everything and connect again, and we have account details here, and run it again. Now you have only 2 records, correct? So next thing, let's try this. So there is some error. Let's go back and see what is the error. Let's go back to Eclipse here, and we'll see, expand the console. So what is the issue here? So first name is not found. Header name, first name is not found. Okay. So it says like, so line number is bank controller, line number 36. Let's go there and we'll see what is happening over there. So it says the first name is not available. Okay, let's check the file once. So how it is like, okay, it is just a first name and the last name. There is no underscore between that. Okay, let's stop the server and then let's modify the changes. First name and the last name. So account underscore type, which is correct, and everything else remains the same. So we stopped the application, right? Let's run it again. It might take a few seconds, and let's verify that account number, first name, last name, account type, email, and address and zip code. Okay, so now which is everything good. So let's go back to our browser, and we need to let's wait until the Spring application up and running. So I think it's getting started. Let's give it a few seconds. Okay, the application has been started. Let's go back, and now we can refresh the same page again. Yes, continue. It might ask us to log in again. Yes, connect it and go back to account information and run it. Yes, we got the 2 records. Now let's go back to Postman and hit the same request again. See, now we got upload successful message. So which means the records which retrieved from the CSV file, it will be stored inside the database. So now we have only 2. Now I'm gonna run it again. See what happened. We have all other information which we retrieved from the CSV file, and then they are stored in this table. And fetch operation is pretty easy, and I think you can do it. And I think this will help a lot of people, because I was facing it is kind of a difficult for me when I'm doing it the first time. But once you completed that, you will understand it's pretty easy to do it. Okay, so if you have any questions, just comment below and I'll help you on that. Thank you so much.